Back in December of 2022, I made a video talking about how the iPad mini 6th generation is the last true iPad. And at time of recording, it's been 620 days since I made that video, and the 6th generation iPad mini is still the last true iPad. And today, I'm going to reiterate why that's the case. I got the idea for this video because I recently picked up a 1st generation iPad to play around with, and now having personally experienced Apple's original intention for the iPad, I feel even more confident in my argument. So let's get into it. Alright, so the year's 2010, it's January 27th, and at the Yerba Buena Center of the Arts, Steve Jobs introduces a device that's meant to sit between the portability and ease of use of an iPhone and the power and capability of a Mac computer. He introduces the first iPad. He demos apps that take advantage of the, at the time, massive touchscreen and shows off the novel and nearly magical experience back then of touching a website to navigate it. On that day, what we would consider to be a modern tablet was born. Now, of course, with this being an Apple product, we saw some pretty consistent upgrades come to it. We had cameras added, we had the amazingly sharp Retina display added, and the processor upgrades that came to it saw this relatively powerful 1st generation iPad become even more of a powerhouse as the years went on. But here's the thing, from 2010 till around 2015, the focus of the iPad remained exactly the same as it was when it first came out. Deliver an experience that was more than what the iPhone could give you, but generally provided more ease of use than a Mac. And for the average user, this focus on being a middle device between the iPhone and the Mac was great. You could browse the web, read emails, you could read a book or look at photos, all of these things on a screen that was bigger than the iPhone, but generally much easier to use and more convenient than pulling out your Mac. But in 2015, Apple would introduce the 1st generation iPad Pro, and with its introduction, the iPad would begin to shift focus. Now, I mean, the iPad Pro wasn't the first time that Apple had made a variation of the iPad. Before the Pro models came out, we had the Air and the Mini, but the differences with those was in the hardware. The iPad Air was a thinner, lighter, more premium version of the traditional iPad, and the iPad Mini was, well, the mini version of it. But nothing really changed on the software side of things when those two versions were introduced. But when the iPad Pro was introduced, things on the software side started to change too. The most notable thing being that the iPad Pro had split screen, which isn't very consequential, but it was the beginning of a shift. And this shift would really begin to blur the line between the Mac and the iPad that Apple had put in place all the way back in 2010. Now, to be fair, this wasn't really a big thing at the time. The iPad Pro had a very big display, and it had a really powerful processor, so it made sense to be able to run 2 apps at a time and take advantage of both of those things. And when the iPad Air got a bigger screen and a more powerful processor, it got it as well. I do feel like it was a bit of a stretch on the iPad mini, but I digress. The thing is, this fairly basic addition to iOS would soon be joined by features like a file browser, more pro-ish apps, USB drive support, cursor support, a pseudo Windows environment, external display capabilities, and on and on. Oh, and just a side note here to address something from the previous video I made like this, I am aware that the original iPad did have a keyboard accessory that you could use, but you would mount the iPad in a vertical orientation instead of a horizontal orientation. So it wasn't so much like turning your iPad into a laptop as it was more turning the iPad into a typewriter. But that's neither here nor there. I just wanted to make that clear because I know that that accessory existed, but it wasn't really doing the same thing as the newer keyboard accessories. So let's be real. Anyway, the point that I'm getting at is that this allowed you to basically buy accessories and take advantage of features that would turn your iPad into more of a MacBook without macOS. But then, of course, that also brings up the complaint a lot of people have, which is that the hardware has begun to really outpace the software on the iPads, but that's an entire topic for a different video. Anyway, back to my original point. If you look at the iPad Pro, or the Air, or the vanilla, or regular iPad, the one that's not the Pro or the Air. You look at those 3 devices in their first-party keyboard and trackpad accessories, and they look like laptops. And for a lot of average users, they're going to function like laptops as well. But now take a look at the iPad mini. There's no crazy laptop-grade chip in it, even though the chip it uses is actually more powerful than the basic iPad, weirdly enough. There's no massive color-accurate display on it. There's no insane storage options. There's no keyboard trackpad combo accessories made by Apple for it. And there's a lot of software features that have actually been cut out of its version of iPadOS. When you compare the iPad mini to all the other iPads that Apple makes, people who are looking for a laptop replacement device wouldn't even look twice at the Mini. It's too small, it's not powerful enough, it doesn't have accessories that turn it into a laptop, And that, in my opinion, is why it is still the last true iPad. For me personally, I have two accessories on my iPad mini. I have the magnetic folio case and I have the Apple Pencil. And I do this because I essentially use this like a hybrid between the first iPad and a digital notebook. Essentially using it how the original iPad was meant to be used, but more portable because, well, it's the mini version. So essentially my iPad mini is a book, a web browser, a media consumption machine, a journal, and a sketch pad. And all of these things are right at the tip of my fingers. Now, I could do these things on my iPhone or on my Mac, but the iPad mini lets me do it in a way that's more capable than my iPhone, but way more convenient than doing it on my Mac. So I mean, sure, the modern line of iPads, iPad Pros, and iPad Airs are fantastic products. They are so close to being laptop replacement devices. They give users an overall great experience. They have really interesting ways of introducing alternate workflows for some professionals. They have fantastic overall hardware and are extremely powerful. But honestly, they are long divorced from what the original iPad set out to do in 2010. But the iPad mini, well, I mean, obviously it does more than what the first-gen iPad did, but it shares a lot more DNA with the original iPad than anything Apple's currently making with an iPad label on it. That's not a bad thing, but if you want an iPad that isn't a MacBook without macOS, the iPad mini is still it. It is still the last true iPad. Either way, that's been it. Thank you all so much for watching. This has been a really fun video to kind of dive into, going from the new iPad mini to the original iPad. Let me know if you all want an entire video on like the history of this, or just talking about trying to use one of these in the modern day, because it's been interesting. But let me know what you all think in the comments below. I have way too many iPads, but I was glad that I got to kind of talk about each of them in this video. And yeah, give me your opinions. Let me know what you think in the comments. Of course, if you like this kind of content, give it a like. Subscribe if you want to make sure you don't miss more content like this. And until then, thank you all so much for watching this video, and I hope to see you all in the next one. Make sure to be there and have a good one.